The Grand Monarch Hotel glittered like a palace, its chandeliers spilling rivers of golden light across velvet drapes and polished marble floors. The air reeked of wealth and arrogance, $1,000 perfume laced with champagne laughter. At the head of the endless table sat Edward Hargrave, his silver hair gleaming beneath the crystal glow, his pen poised over a contract that promised billions. Around him, men in tuxedos and women in diamonds toasted to their own greatness, blind to anything beyond the shimmer of their glasses. They believed history was about to be written in their favor, but history was watching from the shadows. Ethan Monroe, only 11, crouched behind a velvet curtain, his worn sneakers silent on the plush carpet. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was the maid's son, invisible by design, a boy told to stay hidden in the staff's break room. But Ethan had slipped out, drawn by a restless pulse in his chest and the echo of his grandfather's words. "Look past the noise, Ethan. The real fight hides in silence." From his hiding place, his sharp blue eyes locked on the document. Something was wrong. He couldn't read every word, but he saw the trap nestled in its fine print, like a snake coiled beneath roses. His heart thundered as he stepped forward, his small frame breaking the polished illusion of the room. Laughter faltered. Champagne glasses paused midair. Edward Hargrave's golden pen hovered inches above the paper. And then Ethan's voice, trembling yet steady, sliced through the ballroom like a blade of glass. "Don't sign that!" The words hung heavy in the air, shattering the arrogance around the table. For the first time that night, the most powerful people in the room looked not at the contract, but at the boy who dared to speak. Ethan Monroe was not supposed to exist in the glittering heart of the Grand Monarch. His world was the staff quarters with their bleach-scented halls and narrow benches, a place where workers were trained to be unseen, to glide in and out like shadows. His mother, Margaret, had told him countless times, "Stay in the break room, finish your homework, read your book, don't wander." But the break room was a cage tonight, its humming fluorescent lights harsh on his eyes, its silence too loud for a boy with restless thoughts. He had finished his book, the old war manual his grandfather had left him, its corners worn soft from countless readings. General Robert Hale had been no ordinary man. He had been a soldier who understood the quiet architecture of strategy, who taught Ethan to listen to the details no one else noticed, who would lean down with a gravelly voice and say, "The enemy hides in the space between words. Find the soldier hidden in the horse." Ethan had read the final page again and again, but the room pressed in like a cell, and curiosity tugged at his feet like an invisible hand. So he slipped out, silent as a whisper, moving down the service corridor where waiters rushed with trays of sparkling wine and towering desserts. He made himself small, ducking behind carts, weaving through shadows, his sneakers barely making a sound on the plush crimson carpet. He remembered his grandfather's lessons. The best scout is the one who is never seen. Tonight, Ethan was a scout. When he found the gap in the velvet curtains and dared to peek through, the sight stole his breath. The ballroom was a world of impossible beauty, chandeliers dripping light like liquid gold, dresses shimmering like waves, men in sharp tuxedos laughing with the confidence of predators. To the guests, the room was a stage where wealth played the starring role. To Ethan, it was a battlefield disguised as a celebration. He searched for his mother and found her near the head table, moving with practiced grace, her face calm, though he knew the strain in her shoulders, the tension she carried like armor every day to survive. To them, she was nothing, a uniform, a servant. But to Ethan, she was the anchor of his world. He noticed how the diamond-clad woman snapped her fingers impatiently, how the man with the shining watch leaned too close to Edward Hargrave, his voice oozing like oil, promising riches that glinted sharper than the jewels around the table. Ethan's pulse quickened. He could not yet name the poison in the air, but he could feel it. It was greed. It was hunger dressed in silk. He thought of his grandfather again, the lesson drilled into him as they studied history on their living room floor. Greed makes men blind, Ethan. They will walk straight into the jaws of their own destruction if you let them. Ethan pressed his small hand against the curtain, his breath shallow. He was supposed to be invisible, but his eyes caught details the giants of the room ignored. The pen gleaming gold, the document thick and bound in leather. The way Hargrave's hand trembled ever so slightly before he masked it with composure. Ethan saw it all, and for the first time in his young life, he understood what it meant to carry a responsibility too heavy for a child's shoulders. He was 11, a boy in worn sneakers, but tonight he was the only one watching with clear eyes. And though fear twisted in his stomach, another voice, quiet but insistent, whispered inside him, "If you see the soldier and the horse and do nothing, the city burns." The ballroom smelled of money, of cigars disguised under cologne, of ambition so sharp it could cut. From his hidden corner, Ethan Monroe watched the wolves circle in tuxedos. They smiled like gentlemen, but their eyes gleamed with the same hunger he had seen once in a stray dog, cornering another for scraps. At the center of it all sat Edward Hargrave, billionaire, his silver hair combed back, his face carved with fatigue. The golden pen in his hand hovered above a thick contract bound in dark leather, its pages a minefield dressed as opportunity. To the crowd, it was the deal of the decade. To Ethan, it was the gleam of teeth in the dark. Beside Hargrave leaned Marcus Vale, his watch shining brighter than the chandeliers, his grin too wide, too polished. He whispered words like honey, but Ethan felt a sting of venom in every syllable. "It's a masterpiece, Edward. Sign it and you cement your legacy." Around the table, laughter erupted, glasses raised high, toasts echoing like victory drums. But Ethan's eyes didn't rest on the champagne or the diamonds. They fixed on the paper, on a line of words his grandfather would have circled with a red pen. Asset realignment protocol. He didn't understand corporate law, but he understood traps, because he had been trained by a soldier who told him, never trust the gift too easily accepted. He saw the wolves mock a young waiter who had spilled wine, their cruelty sharp as broken glass. He saw his mother, Margaret, rush in with calm efficiency, covering the stain with a napkin, her dignity wrapped around her like armor no insult could pierce. To the wolves, she was furniture. To Ethan, she was the pillar that held his world. The woman in diamonds sneered, ordering his mother to fire the trembling server, her voice dripping disdain. Ethan clenched his fists, his heart hammering with rage he couldn't show. He was invisible, and invisibility was his shield, but it was also a prison. He kept his eyes locked on Hargrave. The billionaire didn't laugh. He didn't join in the cruelty. He just tightened his grip on the arm of his chair, his silence heavy, his pen still uncapped, waiting. Marcus Vale leaned closer, his voice like a snake's hiss disguised as a lullaby. "Just sign it, Edward. By tomorrow, the world will call you the greatest deal-maker alive." Ethan's breath caught. He could see it, the moment before the jaws snapped shut. The laughter around the table masked the tension, but Ethan had learned to listen to the silence beneath noise. His grandfather's lessons roared in his mind. The real battle hides in the quiet, in the detail no one else sees. He pressed his hand against the velvet curtain. His chest rose and fell like a soldier before the charge. If he stayed hidden, the wolves would feast, and his mother's world, his world, would collapse into ruin. If he stepped out, he risked everything. Their home, her job, the fragile safety they had built. But the thought of silence was heavier than fear. He looked again at the pen, its golden tip trembling above the paper, and the voices of greed chanting in victory. Ethan felt the decision crystallize inside him. He would not let the wolves write the ending. The ballroom was alive with the sound of victory, glasses clinking, laughter sharp as knives, the golden pen hovering above the contract like a blade about to cut history. Ethan Monroe felt his breath catch in his throat, his small hands trembling as he pressed against the velvet curtain. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind, steady and commanding even from the grave. "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." But he wasn't a man. He was a boy in worn sneakers, a boy whose mother scrubbed floors and served food to people who never looked at her face, a boy who should have been invisible. And yet he knew with every beat of his heart that invisibility was no longer an option. The soldier and the horse was already inside the gates. He stepped forward before his courage could vanish. His sneakers made no sound on the crimson carpet as he walked out from behind the curtain, each step small but deliberate. At first, no one noticed. The music of greed was too loud, the wolves too drunk on the scent of blood. But then Marcus Vale's eyes flicked toward him, and the grin collapsed into confusion. Conversations faltered, heads turned, a ripple spread across the ballroom as the image burned into their sight. An 11-year-old boy in a plain cotton shirt and fraying sneakers, walking toward the head table with the steady focus of a soldier marching into battle. Margaret froze, her serving tray trembling in her hands, her face going pale. "Ethan," she whispered, a plea sharp with terror, but he didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Edward Hargrave, the billionaire whose hand hovered over the page. Ethan stopped just as the golden tip touched the signature line. The world seemed to hold its breath. His voice was small, but it pierced the air sharper than any toast. "Don't sign that!" The silence was deafening. For a heartbeat, the entire ballroom was frozen, then shattered by laughter, cruel and mocking. Marcus Vale leaned back, his oily smile returning, his voice booming with ridicule. "Well, well, the maid's boy has something to say. What's next, child? Going to teach us how to balance a checkbook?" The woman in diamonds chimed in, her words venom dipped in amusement. "How precious! He thinks he's part of the board now. Does your mother let you stay up late to play businessman?" The table erupted again, their laughter a weapon meant to crush him. Ethan's cheeks burned, but he stood straighter. His grandfather's lesson rang louder. Insults are the weapons of cowards. He ignored them. He looked only at Hargrave. The billionaire hadn't laughed. His piercing gray eyes studied Ethan. Not with mockery, but with something sharper. Curiosity, perhaps even recognition. "What did you say?" Hargrave's voice was low, measured, carrying the weight of command that silenced the jeers. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry, but the words came steady. "It's a trap, sir. That contract, it hides something. Page 12 under contingency protocols. Asset realignment. It doesn't mean what they tell you. It means surrender. In 30 days, everything you own will belong to them." Margaret's voice broke as she rushed forward, her hand grabbing his arm, trembling with fear. "Mr. Hargrave, please forgive him. He doesn't know. He's just a boy. Ethan, stop this, now!" Ethan pulled his arm free, gently but firmly. His blue eyes, so young yet so old, turned back to the billionaire. "I know what I saw. My grandfather was a soldier. He taught me how to find the thing that doesn't belong. That phrase doesn't belong. It's the soldier hidden in the horse." The ballroom stirred with uneasy murmurs. Faces turned pale. The mocking laughter died down into silence laced with confusion. Hargrave's pen hovered, motionless, his gaze locked on Ethan as if the boy's words had peeled away a veil no one else had dared to lift. The room was balanced on the edge of a blade, the wolves waiting for Hargrave to laugh, to dismiss the child, to restore the order of power. But he didn't. Instead, with a voice calm but edged with steel, Edward Hargrave said, "Explain." Ethan Monroe felt the weight of every eye in the ballroom pressed down on him, the chandeliers blazing overhead like cruel suns. The polished marble floor beneath him, suddenly more battlefield than banquet. His chest rose and fell too fast, but his voice, when it came, carried the steadiness of a boy repeating a lesson carved into him long ago. "The Trojan horse," he began, his gaze never leaving Edward Hargrave, "was a gift. The Greeks gave it to the Trojans to make them believe the war was over. It was beautiful, carved of wood, a trophy. So they dragged it inside their walls and celebrated. But hidden inside were soldiers. And in the middle of the night, those soldiers opened the gates. Troy was destroyed not by force, but by a lie hidden in plain sight." A ripple of discomfort spread through the glittering crowd. Ethan's small voice carried the weight of an old truth that no diamond necklace or polished suit could dismiss. He pointed to the contract on the table, his finger trembling, but his eyes fierce. "That phrase, asset realignment protocol, it's the soldier in the horse. It looks harmless. It looks like boring words, but it isn't. It's the trigger that gives everything to them. Not a merger, not a partnership, surrender." Marcus Vale leapt to his feet, his oily charm cracking into fury. "This is absurd. This child is spouting fairy tales. Are we really entertaining the circus? Arthur, this is a billion-dollar deal vetted by top lawyers. You'll let a maid's boy rewrite corporate law?" His voice wavered, too sharp, too desperate. The woman in diamonds tried to laugh, but it rang hollow. "Really, Edward, it's embarrassing. Children should be in school, not..." "Quiet." Hargrave's voice cut through the room like a blade, cold and absolute. The woman's mouth snapped shut. Even Marcus faltered, his protest dying in his throat. The billionaire's eyes locked on Ethan, gray and unblinking. "How do you know this?" Ethan's throat tightened, but he spoke anyway. "My grandfather, Colonel James Monroe, taught me to look for the detail that doesn't fit. He said the enemy hides his weapon in the smallest thing, a single word. I saw it. I don't know all the laws, sir, but I know a trap when I see one." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint clink of ice melting in a forgotten glass. Across the room, Sarah Monroe stood frozen, tears pooling in her eyes, her hands twisting in her apron, as if she could wring the moment into something safer. "Please," she whispered, but no one heard her. Hargrave leaned back slowly, studying Ethan like a man examining a rare relic pulled from the earth. Around them, powerful men shifted uneasily in their seats, the scent of fear replacing the perfume of arrogance. The assistant, a quiet woman who had lingered at the edges of the room unnoticed, was already flipping through the contract, her hands shaking. "Page 12, Ethan said softly, his voice cutting through her frantic rustling. "Under contingency protocols. It's there." She found it. Her eyes skimmed the line and her face drained of color. She leaned down and whispered into Hargrave's ear. The billionaire's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the golden pen as if it were a weapon. His gaze snapped to Marcus Vale, whose face now glistened with sweat. "You knew," Hargrave said, his voice like thunder rumbling beneath the surface. Marcus stammered, his oily composure gone. "Edward, listen, it's standard—" "Enough!" Hargrave's voice roared, silencing him, then softer, to Ethan. "You saw what no one else did, a boy who wasn't even supposed to be here." Ethan swallowed hard, his knees weak but his spine straight. "Sir, I couldn't stay hidden. My grandfather said silence is surrender. I had to speak." The room was utterly still, the glittering guests reduced to shadows in the presence of a truth they had mocked seconds ago. And for the first time, Edward Hargrave smiled. Not the polished smile of a tycoon, but the fierce, dangerous smile of a man who had just seen through the enemy's disguise. The golden ballroom had never felt so cold, the chandeliers above throwing down a merciless light that stripped away every mask at the table. Ethan Monroe stood there, his small frame rigid, his voice still echoing in the silence like the toll of a distant bell. Edward Hargrave, the billionaire at the head of the table, didn't move his pen toward the signature line. Instead, he leaned back, eyes narrowing, his expression carved from stone. The assistant handed him the contract, her hands trembling, and he scanned the page with deliberate precision. His silence was louder than any roar, and the glittering guests shifted uneasily, the weight of realization pressing on their chests. Finally, Hargrave spoke, his voice sharp and cutting. "This clause gives away my empire." Gasps rippled like a wave. Marcus Vale, his oily hair damp with sweat, jumped to his feet, his words tumbling out in panicked defiance. "Edward, you're misinterpreting it. The boy is confused. This is technical language. Boilerplate." But Hargrave's stare cut through him like glass. "Sit down," he ordered, his voice flat, final. Marcus froze, then sank back into his chair, his jaw clenched, his confidence shattered. Ethan's heart hammered, but he felt a strange calm settle in. He had spoken. He had done his part. The rest was no longer his alone. Hargrave looked at the boy, and for a fleeting moment, the billionaire's cold exterior cracked, replaced by something softer, older, the look of a man who saw in Ethan a reflection of battles long past. "Tell me," Hargrave said quietly, "what else do you see?" Ethan hesitated. His voice, though small, carried an eerie steadiness. "I see a Trojan horse. I see men who would smile as they burn your house down, then sell the ashes for profit. I see soldiers hidden inside gifts." The crowd stirred. Some averted their eyes. Others whispered furiously. Marcus slammed his fist against the table, his mask of charm now fully shattered. "This is madness. You'll trust a child over your own board? Over lawyers who have spent years crafting this deal?" His voice cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. Hargrave didn't even glance at him. Instead, he nodded to his assistant, who slipped a phone from her pocket and dialed with urgency. Within moments, the general counsel of Hargrave Enterprises was on speaker, his voice tinny but decisive as he confirmed Ethan's interpretation. Mr. Hargrave, this clause, Asset Realignment Protocol, it is predatory. It transfers operational control in 30 days. It's a kill switch. Whoever drafted this attempted a hostile takeover disguised as a merger. If you had signed, you would have lost everything. The air drained from the room. The woman in diamonds pressed a hand to her throat, her glittering facade slipping into horror. The man beside her swore under his breath. Marcus Vale turned pale, his lips parting but no words emerging. Edward Hargrave rose slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the ruined deal. He picked up the contract with deliberate disdain, holding it aloft for everyone to see. Then, with a sharp, violent motion, he tore it clean in half. The sound of ripping paper rang like gunfire in the hushed ballroom. Another tear, and another. The once sacred document fell in pieces across the table like confetti at a funeral. Hargrave's eyes locked on Marcus Vale, and his voice, though calm, carried the weight of thunder. You planned to gut my company, Vale, to steal what I built. You came into my house with poison dressed as gold. You underestimated me. Worse, you underestimated him. Oh, he gestured toward Ethan, whose breath caught in his chest as hundreds of eyes turned to him. The boy in worn sneakers and a cotton shirt, the child meant to stay hidden, now stood as the unlikely savior of an empire. Marcus stumbled back, his chair screeching against the marble floor. Edward, please, he stammered, but the plea was hollow. Hargrave's gaze was merciless. Get out and pray I never hear your name again. Security moved, silent and efficient, guiding Marcus toward the doors as his protest dissolved into the murmurs of a crowd that no longer respected him. Ethan watched, his hands trembling, but his heart steady, as the predators who once filled the room with laughter now cowered in the presence of truth. For the first time in the boy's short life, silence no longer felt like weakness. It felt like power. The ballroom emptied slowly, leaving only silence and the faint echo of a life almost stolen. Ethan Monroe stood beside his mother, his small hand clutching hers, though his eyes never left Edward Hargrave. The billionaire's silver hair gleamed beneath the last flicker of chandelier light, his frame tall but wary, a man who had seen betrayal face to face. He stepped toward Ethan, not with the distance of a titan to a child, but with the solemn gravity of a soldier approaching an equal. He knelt, lowering himself until his sharp blue eyes met Ethan's, and for the first time his voice softened. You saved me, he said simply. Not just me, every worker in my company, every family who depends on us. You saw what none of us could see. Ethan swallowed hard, the enormity of it sinking in. He hadn't planned to be brave. He had only spoken because silence felt like surrender. Hargrave reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bronze medal, tarnished but dignified. This was my father's, he explained, his voice catching. He earned it in a war where truth was often buried beneath noise and fear. Tonight you reminded me that integrity still wins battles. I want you to have it. The medal was heavy in Ethan's palm, its weight pressing into his skin, not as a reward but as a responsibility. His mother's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling with a pride she could not speak. Hargrave rose again, his voice carrying across the room with renewed authority. From this night forward, you are not invisible, Ethan Monroe. You are a voice this world needs. The boy nodded, his chest tight, knowing he had stepped into a story far larger than himself. And as they left the glittering hall behind, Ethan glanced back once, realizing the world would never see him as just the maid's son again. He was something more, proof that even the quietest whisper can topple giants. Have you ever underestimated someone because of their silence, their uniform, or their youth? Tonight proves how dangerous that mistake can be. Tell us in the comments, have you ever witnessed the invisible reveal their true power?